Hello, my name is Özgür Ünlühisarcıklı. I'm the Ankara Office Director at the German Marshall Fund of the United States, where I work on transatlantic relations as well as Turkish politics and Turkish foreign policy.
And my name is Nathan Kohlenberg. I'm a research assistant with the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund here in Washington, D.C., where I work on the malign finance and corruption team.
Turkey will hold parliamentary and presidential elections on May 14, Sunday. These elections are pivotal because they could lead to political change in Turkey. Now, with the presidential election, if no candidate gets more than 50% of the valid votes, actually 50% plus one of the valid votes in the first round of the election, there will be a second round on May 28, Sunday. There are two main candidates in the presidential election. The incumbent president Recep Tayyip Erdogan and leader of the main opposition party Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Both candidates are supported by a set of parties, and I would like to compare their support bases, the campaigns they are running, and the themes that they're using in their campaigns. So President Erdogan's alliance is basically mainly right-wing nationalist and conservative parties, whereas Kılıçdaroğlu's alliance is a little bit more diverse. His own party, the Republican People's Party, is a social democratic party, which is on the left. But the other five alliance parties are all on the right wing of the spectrum, ranging from moderate Islam to moderate nationalism to center-right. So if we want to compare their campaigns, President Erdogan is basically campaigning himself. He's the greatest asset that his party has. He has been able to build a personality cult over the years, and the followers of his party actually want to follow him. They're there because of him. On the contrary, in the Kılıçdaroğlu's alliance, first of all, there are several chairmen, the presidents of the parties who are very popular, who can campaign individually, both for their parties, but also for Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. And Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu also has the two popular mayors of Istanbul and Ankara, and I must say, a bit more popular than himself, actually, who are also campaigning on his behalf. So which means that actually the opposition has an advantage in terms of how many provinces they can go to in a given day or throughout the campaign. So Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, as he is the opposition, he can make more promises credibly because he's not tested and tried yet. So he's basing his campaign on economic and social promises, which are bordering or actually have crossed the border of economic populism. He is basing his rhetoric on reconciliation of different cultural groups in Turkey, not othering any societal group in Turkey, and basically creating a common future. Whereas President Erdogan, because he has been in power now in over 2 decades, he cannot really make new promises because he's tested and tried. So he's basing his campaign on polarization, on scaremongering, and basically on increasing the tension with the other side. So we are now approaching the election day. We're basically 2 days before the first round of the presidential election. It's really a very close election, and it's impossible to predict the outcome with any certainty. But I think it's fair to say that Kılıçdaroğlu, the opposition candidate, is the front runner, and he does have a narrow window for winning in the first round, whereas Erdogan doesn't really have that window. But if it does not happen and there's a rerun, there's a second round 2 weeks later, again, Kılıçdaroğlu is the front runner with a very small margin. So Nate, from your perspective, looking from Washington, why do you think that this election is important?
Well, thank you, Oscar. I think this is a particularly important election because of the trends that we've seen in Turkey over the past 10 years. Erdogan has been in power in Turkey for 20 years, much of which has seen, tremendous development and economic growth. But over the course of the past 10 years, there's also been substantial backsliding on major democratic indicators, including press freedom, judicial independence, and other things that we would consider to be key to a functioning, solvent democracy. This year, I think we can see that the unified nature of the opposition presents a challenge that Erdogan hasn't faced in the past. In the past, his opposition has been quite fractured, but this year the opposition have come together behind a single candidate, despite their significant, ideological diversity, and that gives them an opportunity that they haven't had in the past. I think another thing that makes this election different than past years are the headwinds that Erdogan faces politically. One of the major headwinds is the economy, which has really suffered from, I think, Erdogan's unorthodox monetary policy that has led to really severe inflation. The earthquake has also been a real problem for the government because there's a perception that the recovery efforts were not handled well by the government, and even that corruption in the construction industry could have contributed to the scale of the disaster. And there are a number of political corruption scandals as well that have rocked the government and given the opposition a real opportunity. I think the global context this year is different as well. NATO has really taken center stage in large part due to the war in Ukraine. And so Turkey's balancing act between Russia and the United States is more complicated than it's been in the past. Oscar, I know there was violence at a political rally last weekend. Would you be able to put that in a little bit more context for us and tell us whether you think that's likely to be a one-off event or whether we should expect more political violence in the coming days?
Nate, unfortunately, it's not a one-off event, but just one example of what's going on in Turkey right now. I mean, first of all, to put things into a context, this election is taking place in a very tense environment. All the parties and their supporters actually treat the upcoming election as an Armageddon, as if, this is the last exit before the bridge for everyone, depending on where you want the bridge to be going. So you can basically smell the tension in the air. And I would say this is both ways. But another thing that we see is partly because of this tension, the opposition candidates and parties are often subjected to verbal and physical violence to their buildings, facilities, and their candidates campaigning on the street, etc., are attacked either verbally or physically. And we must here also acknowledge that the governing party's facilities have also been attacked, mobbed a few times. So what happened in Erzurum is just one example where there was basically a big rally with thousands of, let's say, participants. A mob of 200 young men who had already accumulated stones in front of them started attacking Mayor İmamoğlu of Istanbul through these stones. İmamoğlu was not hurt, but a lot of the participants were, and İmamoğlu had to just cut his speech short and leave Erzurum. So this is just an example of the environment this election is taking place in. There are also, of course, legitimate concerns about election integrity, election security, etc. But the messages coming from the opposition, and particularly the main opposition party, is that they have things under control. They have a robust system for ensuring election integrity, and voters shouldn't be concerned about this. They probably don't want their voters to be dissuaded from going to the polls. But let me ask you a question. So, depending on the outcome, what do you think would be the implications, not only for Turkey, but Turkey's relations with the West as well?
Well, I can certainly speak to the international context, and I think the outcome will be very significant, especially for the NATO alliance. Turkey is one of the most important members of NATO. It has one of the largest armed forces in NATO and is a key player in regional politics. At the same time, Erdogan's government has balanced NATO with relations with Russia. He and Putin have a working relationship on a number of important issues, including Syria and Libya. And if Erdogan triumphs, I think we can expect that relationship to go stronger and for Erdogan to rely more on Russia than he has in the past, as relations with the United States are more strained. Kılıçdaroğlu has suggested that he would draw Turkey closer to NATO and to the EU if he is able to create a.
Well, if I may add 2 cents of mine, I think that
Please.
if there was a new government under Kılıçdaroğlu, almost certainly Turkey would reverse the democratic backsliding, and Turkey would, restart the democratization agenda domestically. But on foreign policy, although there would be changes, I think that the changes would be less than what's expected or desired in Europe and the United States. Because like in any country, Turkish foreign policy is also based on structural factors that don't change from government to government. Now, what will happen is style will change definitely. The opposition is committed to reinstitutionalizing Turkish foreign policy with the foreign ministry playing a major role, as opposed to the foreign policy being the foreign ministry being sidelined today. I think that the threat and interest perceptions in Turkey would not change, but Turkey would change the manner in which it protects the interests that it's perceiving. And also, I think, significantly, because Turkey would go back to democratization, its relations with Europe and the United States would take place in a more positive atmosphere. Now, the news from Ankara, at least from me, but also observing what the opposition parties say, Turkey will not abandon its cooperation with Russia, but rebalance it and reframe it in a way that it does not contradict with Turkey's transatlantic commitments and would make it more realistic and based on mutual respect, as opposed to what we see today.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Nate, it was very nice talking to you today. I hope we can have a similar conversation after the election takes place.
Wonderful speaking with you, Oscar. I'm going to look forward to that.